The emergency room is chaos. Gunshot wounds, blast injuries, blood on every surface. A young woman in pale blue scrubs moves between gurneys with frightening efficiency, suturing, intubating, barking orders that doctors follow without question. She's been working for 53 minutes straight, 15 critical patients, 0 deaths. The senior physician watches her, confused. Who the hell is she? No one knows. She clocked in as a float nurse 3 hours ago. No credentials on file. No one asked questions when the mass casualty arrived. Then the ER doors open. A man in a navy dress uniform walks through, stars on his collar, ribbons across his chest. A SEAL admiral. He stops when he sees her. His face goes pale. Reaper, he says. She doesn't turn around. But her hands stop moving. They thought she was nobody. They were wrong. Lena Cross clocked in at County Memorial Hospital at 2200 hours. The time card machine stamped her badge with a mechanical thunk that echoed in the empty administrative hallway. She adjusted the stethoscope around her neck and walked toward the emergency department, her sneakers making soft, squeaking sounds on the linoleum floor. The hospital had that late-night stillness, fluorescent lights humming overhead, distant monitor alarms, the occasional page over the intercom. She de-worked in dozens of hospitals over the past 3 years. They all felt the same, anonymous, forgettable. Exactly what she needed. The charge nurse barely looked up when Lena approached the main desk. Sharon Martinez, according to her name badge. Mid-40s, tired eyes, the kind of seasoned nurse who'd seen everything and was impressed by nothing. She glanced at Lena's temporary ID badge and sighed. "You're the float," Lena nodded. "Lena Cross," Sharon flipped through a clipboard. "We're short 2 nurses tonight. I need you on basic care, vitals, restocking, equipment checks, nothing complicated." "Can you handle that?" Lena kept her face neutral. "Yes," Sharon handed her a list. "Start with Bay 4. Patient needs vitals every 30 minutes, then restock the crash carts. Supply room is down the hall on the left." Lena took the list without comment. Sharon was already looking past her, answering a phone call. Dismissed. Invisible. Perfect. Bay 4 held a 58-year-old man named Richard Torres. Post-surgical observation. Appendectomy 3 hours ago. Lena washed her hands, pulled on gloves, and approached his bedside. He was awake, watching a muted television mounted on the wall. She introduced herself quietly and began taking vitals. Blood pressure, 142/88, slightly elevated but stable. Heart rate, 76. Respiratory rate, 14. Oxygen saturation, 97% on room air. She noted everything on the chart. Torres watched her with mild curiosity. "You knew?" Lena rapped the blood pressure cuff. "Just for tonight. You seem like you know what you're doing." Lena didn't respond. She finished the vitals, updated his chart, and moved to the next task, restocking crash carts. Checking defibrillator batteries, calibrating oxygen regulators, grunt work. The kind of invisible labor that kept emergency departments running. No one noticed her. No one asked questions. She preferred it that way. Around midnight, Lena was assigned to assist with a patient in Bay 7. Michael Brennan, 32 years old, motorcycle accident, chest trauma. He'd been brought in an hour ago with multiple rib fractures and a collapsed lung. The attending physician, Dr. Raymond Hayes, had inserted a chest tube to re-expand the lung. Hayes was in his mid-50s, confident to the point of arrogance, the kind of doctor who believed his 15 years of experience made him infallible. Lena approached the bedside to check Brennan's vitals. She glanced at the chest tube setup. Something was wrong. The tube was angled incorrectly, too lateral. It was draining fluid, but not efficiently. The lung wasn't re-expanding properly. She could see it in the patient's breathing pattern, shallow, compensatory, working too hard. Lena finished taking vitals and stepped out of the bay. "Doctor." Hayes was at the nurse's station, typing notes into a computer. She approached carefully. "Dr. Hayes," he didn't look up. "What?" "The patient in Bay 7. "The chest tube placement." Now he looked up, irritation flickering across his face. "What about it?" Lena kept her voice even. "It's angled too far laterally. The lung isn't re-expanding properly. You can see it on the monitor. His work of breathing is increasing." Hayes stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, walked past her into Bay 7, glanced at the monitor, and walked back out. "The tube is placed correctly. I've been doing this for 15 years. I think I know how to place a chest tube." Lena said nothing. Hayes returned to his computer. Anything else? She shook her head. No, sir. He waved her away. Lena walked back to her restocking duties. She checked the clock. 32 minutes later, the monitor in Bay 7 began alarming. Lena was the first to reach him. Michael Brennan was in respiratory distress. His oxygen saturation had dropped to 84%. His breathing was rapid and shallow. The chest tube still wasn't draining properly. Lena didn't wait for orders. She increased his oxygen, adjusted his position to optimize lung expansion, and manually checked the tube placement. It was kinked at the insertion site. She straightened it, and immediately the drainage improved. Brennan's breathing began to ease. His oxygen saturation climbed back to 92%. Doctor. Hayes arrived 30 seconds later, followed by 2 other nurses. He looked at the monitor, then at Lena. What did you do? The tube was kinked. I straightened it. Hayes checked the tube himself, confirmed what she'd said, and stepped back. He didn't thank her, didn't acknowledge she'd been right. He just made a note on the chart and walked away. One of the nurses, a younger woman named Jessica, gave Lena a sympathetic look. Don't take it personally. Hayes doesn't like being corrected. Lena pulled off her gloves. I wasn't correcting him, I was fixing the problem. Jessica smiled slightly. That's what I mean, the rest of the shift was quiet. Lena restocked supplies, took vitals, cleaned equipment. She moved through the ER like a shadow, present but unnoticed. Around 400 hours, she took her break in the staff lounge. The room was empty, except for a vending machine humming in the corner, and a coffee maker that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in weeks. She poured herself a cup of coffee, black, and sat in a plastic chair facing the window. Outside, the city was dark except for streetlights and the occasional passing car. She thought about Michael Brennan, about how close he'd come to a completely preventable complication, about how Dr. Hayes would never admit he'd made a mistake. She'd seen it 1,000 times. In field hospitals, in combat zones, in civilian ERs, ego got people killed. She took a sip of coffee. It tasted like burnt water. She drank it anyway. At 5:17 hours, the overhead speakers crackled to life. Attention all personnel, mass casualty alert, mass casualty alert, multiple trauma patients inbound, ETA 8 minutes. All available staff report to the emergency department immediately. Lena stood, threw her coffee cup in the trash, and walked back to the ER. The department was already transforming. Nurses pulling crash carts into position, doctors gloving up, trauma bays being cleared. Sharon was at the center of it all, coordinating with controlled urgency. She saw Lena and pointed. Cross. You're with Trauma Team 2, Bay 12. Lena nodded and moved into position. Dr. Hayes was leading Trauma Team 2. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Stay out of the way unless I tell you otherwise. Lena said nothing, just waited. The ER doors opened. The first gurney came through, a man in his 40s, unconscious, covered in burns. Then another and another. 15 patients in 8 minutes, explosion at a chemical plant. The chaos had arrived. And with it, everything was about to change. The first gurney crashed through the ER doors at 5:25 hours. A man in his 40s, unconscious, his face and arms covered in second-degree burns. The paramedics were still shouting his vitals when the second gurney arrived. Then the third. Then the fourth. 15 patients in 8 minutes. The air filled with the smell of burnt flesh, chemical residue, and blood. The ER transformed from controlled order into barely managed chaos. Nurses were running. Doctors were shouting over each other. Monitors were alarming in a discordant symphony of distress. Dr. Hayes stood at the center of Trauma Bay 12, trying to coordinate his team. I need a full trauma panel on this patient. CBC, type and cross, talk screen. Someone get me a chest x-ray. Where's respiratory? His voice was rising with each sentence. The nurses were moving, but not fast enough. There were too many patients and not enough hands. Lena stood at the edge of the bay, watching, not the patient, the room. She was reading the chaos like a tactical map, identifying bottlenecks, prioritizing resources, calculating survival probabilities. It was a skill she'd learned in places most of these people would never see. Places where hesitation meant death. A woman was wheeled past her, mid-30s, conscious but struggling to breathe, chemical burns on her chest and neck. The paramedic was bagging her manually, squeezing oxygen into her lungs. Chemical exposure unknown agent, respiratory distress. Oxygen sat dropping, she's at 82%. The attending physician for that bay was still with another patient. No one was moving to help. Lena stepped forward. "I'll take her." The paramedic looked at her uncertain. "Are you?" "Yes." Lena didn't wait for permission. She grabbed the gurney and pulled it into trauma bay 14. The woman's oxygen saturation was at 80% now. Her lips were turning blue. Cyanosis. She was dying. Lena positioned herself at the head of the bed and looked at the woman's airway. Strider high-pitched wheezing, upper airway swelling from chemical exposure. The woman was going to lose her airway completely within minutes. Lena didn't shout for help. She didn't wait for orders. She moved. "I need a rapid sequence intubation kit. Etomidate, succinylcholine, and a 7.5 endotracheal tube." Now, a nurse, Jessica, the one who'd been kind to her earlier, appeared at her side with the kit. "Are you sure you—" "Open it." Jessica opened the kit. Lena drew up the medications with the precision of someone who'd done this hundreds of times under far worse conditions. She administered the sedative, waited exactly 30 seconds for it to take effect, then administered the paralytic. The woman's body went limp. Lena positioned the laryngoscope, visualized the vocal cords through swollen tissue, and passed the endotracheal tube in one smooth motion. 18 seconds from paralytic to secured airway. She inflated the cuff, connected the ventilator, and listened to both lung fields with her stethoscope. Equal breath sounds, perfect placement. The woman's oxygen saturation began climbing immediately. 85%, 88%, 92%. Lena stepped back, pulled off her gloves, and turned to move to the next patient. Jessica stared at her. "Where did you learn to do that?" Lena didn't answer. There was another patient coding 3 bays down. The next 40 minutes blurred into a sequence of controlled interventions. Lena moved between patients with the efficiency of a surgical strike. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for attending physicians to make decisions they were too overwhelmed to make quickly. She just acted. A man with a tension pneumothorax, his left lung collapsed, air building up in his chest cavity, compressing his heart. Lena identified it by observation alone. His trachea was deviated to the right. His neck veins were distended. His blood pressure was dropping. She didn't wait for an X-ray. She grabbed a 14-gauge needle, palpated the second intercostal space on his left side, and thrust the needle through the chest wall. There was a hiss of escaping air. The man's blood pressure stabilized immediately. Dr. Hayes appeared at her shoulder, wide-eyed. "Did you just—" He had a tension pneumothorax. "If I'd waited for imaging, he'd be dead." Hayes opened his mouth, closed it, and walked away without another word. Another patient, a young woman, maybe 25, with penetrating trauma to her abdomen. She was conscious, screaming in pain, blood soaking through the gauze someone had applied in the field. Lena cut away the dressing and examined the wound. Entry point just below the rib cage on the left side. No exit wound. Something was still inside, shrapnel probably. The bleeding was venous, not arterial, survivable if they moved fast. Lena applied direct pressure and called out without raising her voice, but her tone carried authority that cut through the noise. "I need 2 units of O-negative blood, a surgery consult, and an OR prepped for exploratory laparotomy. Now." A nurse hesitated. "I need to check with—" "Now." The nurse ran. The blood arrived. Lena started the transfusion herself, stabilized the patient's pressure, and handed her off to the surgical team when they arrived 6 minutes later. The surgeon glanced at Lena's work, the IV lines, the pressure dressing, the stabilized vitals, and nodded once in professional acknowledgement before wheeling the patient away. Lena moved to the next patient. And the next, a man with chemical burns who was going into shock. She started aggressive fluid resuscitation and covered his burns with sterile dressings. An elderly woman with blast injuries and a suspected traumatic brain injury. Lena performed a rapid neurological exam, identified signs of increased intracranial pressure, elevated the head of her bed, and called for an emergent CT scan. A teenager with a fractured pelvis and internal bleeding. Lena recognized the injury pattern, stabilized him with a pelvic binder, and prioritized him for immediate surgery. Every decision was made in seconds. Every action was precise. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. Just cold, clinical competence honed in environments where mistakes didn't just cost careers, they cost lives. At some point during the chaos, Lena became aware that people were watching her. Not just Jessica, other nurses, residents, even Dr. Hayes. They weren't questioning her anymore. They were following her lead. When she called for equipment, it appeared. When she gave orders, they were executed. The hierarchy of the emergency room had quietly, invisibly inverted. She wasn't supposed to be in charge. She was a float nurse with no credentials on file, no history, no authority. But authority wasn't something granted by a badge or a title. It was something you earned in the moment. And in this moment, Lena had earned it. One patient presented a problem that made her pause. A man in his 50s, unconscious, with respiratory distress and a distinctive chemical smell coming from his skin and breath. Lena leaned closer, inhaled carefully through her mouth and analyzed the odor. Bitter almonds. Her expression didn't change, but her mind shifted into a different mode. Cyanide exposure. Most of the staff wouldn't recognize it. They'd treat it as generic chemical exposure, give supportive care, and watch him die. Lena grabbed a nurse. "I need a hydroxycobalamin kit." "The cyanide antidote, do you have it?" The nurse looked uncertain. I don't know, we might have it in the pharmacy." "Find it, bring it here in 3 minutes or this patient dies." The nurse ran. Lena started supportive care, oxygen, IV fluids, airway management. The nurse returned in 2 minutes and 40 seconds with the kit. Lena administered the antidote, watching the patient's vitals closely. Within minutes, his color began to improve. His oxygen saturation climbed. He was going to survive. Doctor. Hayes appeared again, this time staying at a distance, just observing. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The look on his face said enough. He was realizing he had no idea who this woman was. 53 minutes after the first patient arrived, Lena stepped back from the last critical case. Her hands were covered in blood. Her scrubs were soaked with sweat and fluids. Her hair had come loose from its tie, but she was still standing, still steady. She stripped off her gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and allowed herself one slow breath. The ER was still loud with monitor alarms and urgent conversations, but the immediate crisis had passed. 15 patients, all stabilized, all alive, 0 deaths. The staff was beginning to realize what had just happened, that they'd been part of something extraordinary. That the quiet float nurse who'd been restocking supplies 3 hours ago had just orchestrated one of the most successful mass casualty responses they'd ever seen. Lena washed her hands at the sink slowly, methodically. She stared at the water running over her fingers, watching the blood swirl down the drain. She was exhausted. Not physically, she'd worked longer shifts in worse conditions, but emotionally. Every time she did this, every time she stepped back into the work she'd left behind, it took something from her. A piece of the piece she'd been trying to build. She dried her hands and turned around. The staff was staring at her, not with suspicion, with something closer to awe. "Doctor." Hayes stood at the front of the group, his arrogance replaced with something that looked like confusion and respect. He opened his mouth to speak. "Where did you—" The ER doors opened. Not the ambulance bay, the main entrance. A man walked through. Tall, mid-50s, dressed in a navy dress uniform. White cap, dark jacket, rows of ribbons across his chest, 3 stars on his collar. Rear Admiral. He moved with the controlled posture of someone who'd spent decades in command, but his eyes scanned the room with the alertness of someone who still operated in dangerous places. He saw the aftermath of the mass casualty event, saw the blood on the floor, saw the exhausted staff, and then he saw Lena. He stopped walking, his face went pale, the room went silent. Everyone turned to look at him, then back at Lena. The Admiral's voice cut through the silence like a blade, one word, a call sign. "Reaper." Lena didn't turn around immediately. She stood at the sink, her back to him, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. For a long moment she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly she turned. Her face was blank, tired. But her eyes met his without flinching. "Admiral." The silence in the ER was total. No one moved, no one spoke. They all just stood there trying to understand what they were witnessing. The transformation of the invisible float nurse into someone who made a 3-star admiral go pale. Dr. Hayes found his voice, though it came out uncertain. "Excuse me, this is a restricted area." "If you need," Admiral Hale didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked on Lena. "I'm exactly where I need to be." He took 2 steps closer. You weren't supposed to be here. You were supposed to be in Virginia. Lena's voice was quiet, steady. Plans changed. The Admiral's jaw tightened. We need to talk, now. Lena looked past him at the patient still being monitored. Still critical, still her responsibility. I'm working. This isn't a request. Something flickered in Lena's eyes, something cold. Then make it an order, sir. The tension stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. The staff watched, frozen. Finally, the Admiral exhaled. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. More careful. There's a situation. A bioweapon. Stolen from a military research facility 48 hours ago. We have credible intelligence it's in this city. We need your expertise. Lena didn't react, didn't show surprise or fear, just nodded once. Give me 2 hours to stabilize my patients. The Admiral looked like he wanted to argue. Then he glanced around the ER at the aftermath of what she'd just accomplished and nodded. 2 hours, then you're coming with me. Understood, understood. The Admiral turned and walked out the same way he'd come. The doors closed behind him. The silence persisted for another 5 seconds. Then Dr. Hayes stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? Lena looked at him, at all of them, at their confused, odd faces. She could tell them the truth. She could explain. But explanation was another form of spotlight, and she'd spent 3 years avoiding that. So she did what she always did. She deflected. I'm a nurse. That's all you need to know. She walked past them, back toward the trauma bays, back toward her patients, back to work. Because that was easier than answering questions. Easier than explaining that Reaper wasn't just a call sign. It was a reputation earned in field hospitals in Fallujah and Kandahar and a dozen other places that didn't officially exist. It was a name given to the combat medic who brought people back from the edge of death so consistently that even hardened SEALs started to believe she couldn't be beaten. She de-left that life behind. She de-walked away. But standing here now with blood on her hands and an Admiral using her old call sign, she realized something she'd been avoiding for 3 years. You never really leave. The war just follows you home, and sooner or later it finds you. Lena spent the next hour and 47 minutes doing exactly what she'd promised, stabilizing her patients. She moved between trauma bays with the same methodical efficiency she'd shown during the crisis, but now there was a weight to her movements. A heaviness that hadn't been there before. The staff gave her space, not out of fear, but out of a new kind of respect mixed with uncertainty. They didn't know what to make of her. The float nurse who moved like a surgeon and talked to admirals. Jessica stayed close, helping without being asked, but even she kept her questions to herself. Dr. Hayes watched from a distance. He tried to approach her twice, and both times she'd simply continued working, answering his medical questions with professional brevity and ignoring everything else. The third time he stood in her path. I need to know who you are, for the records, for... Lena looked at him. Her eyes were tired but steady. My name is Lena Cross. I'm a registered nurse with a valid license. That's all you need for your records. Hayes lowered his voice. That Admiral called you Reaper, that's not a name. That's a call sign. Lena finished the sentence for him. It's what they called me when I worked somewhere else. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. I have 15 patients who survived because of you. I deserve to know. You deserve to know that they're alive, that's all. She stepped past him and continued her rounds. Hayes stood there, frustration and curiosity warring on his face, but he didn't follow. At 7:12 hours, Lena checked on Michael Brennan, the motorcycle accident patient whose chest tube she'd corrected hours earlier. He was awake now, groggy from pain medication, but stable. His oxygen saturation was holding at 95%. The chest tube was draining properly. He'd make a full recovery. Lena adjusted his IV drip and made a note on his chart. Brennan looked at her through half-closed eyes. You're the one who saved me, aren't you? Earlier. When I couldn't breathe. Lena didn't confirm or deny, just checked his vitals. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck, but alive, so thank you. Lena nodded once. Rest. You're going to be fine. She turned to leave. Brennan's voice stopped her. Hey, that guy in the uniform, the one who came looking for you, he looked important. Lena didn't turn around. He is. You military? Lena was quiet for a moment. Then, I was. She left before he could ask anything else. At 7:27 hours, Sharon approached her at the nurse's station. The charge nurse looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past 3 hours. "Cross, administrator wants to see you, 4th floor, now." Lena glanced at the clock. She still had 13 minutes before the Admiral's deadline. "I'll go after I finish my rounds." Sharon shook her head. "She said now something about your credentials." There's nothing in the system. No employment history, no references, just a temporary badge issued 3 days ago." Lena had known this was coming. She always knew. Float positions didn't require deep background checks, which is why she used them. But after what had just happened, after an admiral had walked through those doors using her call sign, people were going to start asking questions. And questions led to answers she didn't want to give. "Tell her I'll be up in 10 minutes. Sharon hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but Lena, whatever's going on, whatever you're involved in, thank you. For what you did tonight, those people are alive because of you." Lena didn't respond, just returned to her charts. She never made it to the 4th floor. At 7:34 hours, while she was updating the medication orders for one of the chemical exposure patients, the ER doors opened again. Admiral Hale walked through, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 men in tactical gear flanked him, Navy SEALs in civilian clothes, but unmistakably military. They moved with the controlled awareness of operators who expected trouble. Behind them, a woman in a dark suit carrying a metal briefcase. Federal agent, probably CDC or USAMRID. The Admiral's face was grim. He walked directly to Lena. "We're out of time." Lena set down her pen. "You said 2 hours. That was before we got confirmation. The bioweapon isn't just in the city. We have reason to believe it's already been deployed." The ER went quiet. Everyone within earshot had stopped what they were doing. Lena's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped lower. "Where? We don't know yet, but we need you now, not in 13 minutes. Now, Lena looked past him at her patients. Most were stable, but 3 were still critical. The woman she'd intubated. The man with the tension pneumothorax. The teenager with the pelvic fracture waiting for surgery. They needed monitoring. They needed care. "If she left now, I'll have my people handle your patients." Dr. Hayes had appeared at her elbow. His voice was steady despite the tension in his face. "Whatever this is, if an admiral is pulling you away, it's important. Go." Lena looked at him, saw the shift in his eyes. He didn't understand who she was, but he understood that she was needed elsewhere. That sometimes the hierarchy of needs demanded sacrifices. She nodded once. "The woman in Bay 14 needs her ventilator settings checked every 30 minutes. If her oxygen saturation drops below 90%, increase the PEEP by 2. The man in Bay 9 needs. I'll take care of them." Hayes met her eyes. "I promise." Lena held his gaze for another moment, then turned to the Admiral. "Let's go." They moved quickly through the hospital corridors. Hale didn't speak until they were in a service elevator heading down to the parking garage. The woman with the briefcase, Dr. Sarah Chen, infectious disease specialist from USAMRID, handed Lena a tablet. "We need you to look at this." Lena took the tablet. It showed surveillance footage from a subway station. Timestamp 6:48 hours, 39 minutes ago. A man in a heavy coat standing on a crowded platform. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small canister and released it. Aerosol spray. Invisible to the casual observer, the footage cut to another angle. The man left the station. Within minutes, people on the platform started coughing. Within 10 minutes, 3 people collapsed. Lena looked up from the tablet. "Which line?" "Red line, downtown station, morning rush hour, estimated exposure 300 people. Lena's jaw tightened. "Symptoms, doctor." Chen pulled up medical reports. "Respiratory distress, fever, hemorrhaging, progressing rapidly. We have 12 confirmed cases so far. They're being transported to hospitals across the city." Lena scrolled through the symptoms. The progression pattern, the timeline. She'd seen this before, not in civilian hospitals. In classified briefings about weaponized pathogens developed in military research labs. "This is variant 7. The Admiral's face went hard. "You're certain. Hemorrhagic fever. Engineered for rapid onset and high transmission rate. Mortality rate above 80% without treatment." "Yes, I'm certain." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "The antiviral protocol won't work." "Not the standard one. Variant 7 is resistant to ribavirin. You need the experimental compound, the one that was still in phase 2 trials when I left." Dr. Chen's face went pale. That compound was classified. It's not approved for. I don't care what it's approved for. If you don't use it, everyone exposed on that platform is going to die within 72 hours. The elevator reached the parking garage. The doors opened. 3 black SUVs were waiting, engines running, armed personnel standing guard. This wasn't a consultation. This was a deployment. Admiral Hale gestured toward the lead vehicle. We're setting up a command center at the federal building. We need you to coordinate medical response, identify treatment protocols, train the hospital staff on containment procedures. Lena didn't move toward the vehicle. Where was it stolen from? Hale's expression tightened. That's classified. If I'm going to stop this, I need to know what we're dealing with. Where was the lab? Who had access? How much was taken? Hale exhaled slowly. Fort Detrick. Biosafety Level 4 lab. The theft occurred during a facility transfer. We believe it was an inside job. Approximately 200 milliliters were taken. Enough for multiple deployments. Lena finished his sentence. The subway station was just the first target. We believe so, which is why we need to move. Now, Lena climbed into the SUV. Dr. Chen and one of the SEALs got in beside her. The Admiral took the front passenger seat. The convoy pulled out of the garage with the precision of a military operation. As they drove through the pre-dawn city, Lena stared out the window. The streets were beginning to fill with morning traffic, people heading to work, starting their days, completely unaware that they were living in a city where a bioweapon had just been deployed, where hundreds of people might already be infected, where the next 72 hours would determine whether this became a contained incident or a catastrophic outbreak. Dr. Chen broke the silence. I read your file, your classified file. You were the lead combat medic for SEAL Team 3, 4 deployments. You treated over 300 combat casualties with a 94% survival rate. You also consulted on the Variant 7 development project. You're one of maybe 5 people in the world who understand how this pathogen works. Lena didn't look away from the window. I left that work for a reason. What reason? Lena was quiet for a long moment. Because I got tired of preparing for wars that should never be fought, building weapons that should never exist, treating casualties from operations that should never be authorized. Dr. Chen studied her. But you came back, you're here now. I'm here because people are dying. That's different. Is it? Lena finally turned to look at her. Yes, when I was active, I was part of a system. I followed orders. I enabled operations I didn't always agree with. But as a civilian, as a nurse, I get to choose. I choose to save lives, not because someone ordered me to. Because it's the right thing to do. Admiral Hale spoke from the front seat without turning around. You always had that choice, Reaper, even when you were active. I never ordered you to do anything you didn't believe in. No, sir, but the system did. The mission parameters did. The operational requirements did. And eventually, I realized that just because I could save someone didn't mean I should be part of the machine that put them in danger in the first place. Hale was quiet for a moment. You think we created this problem? I know we did. Variant 7 didn't occur naturally. It was engineered in our lab with our funding under our authorization, and now it's out, and people are dying. So yes, sir, we created this problem. The SUV pulled up to a government building cordoned off by federal agents. They were escorted through multiple security checkpoints into a command center that had been established in a sub-level conference room. Banks of monitors showed surveillance feeds from across the city. Military personnel and federal agents worked at stations coordinating response efforts. In the center of it all, a large screen displayed a map of the subway system with the Red Line station marked in red. Lena approached the map. Show me the exposure timeline. An analyst pulled up the data. Aerosol release at 6:48, first symptoms reported at 6:57, first collapse at 7:02, emergency response activated at 7:08. 12 confirmed cases transported to hospitals by 7:30. Lena studied the timeline. What's the estimated secondary exposure? Unknown. We're tracking everyone who was on that platform, but we don't know how many people they've come in contact with since exposure. Lena turned to Dr. Chen. You need to implement quarantine protocols immediately. Everyone who was on that platform needs to be isolated. Everyone they've had contact with needs to be monitored. And you need to get the experimental antiviral distributed to every hospital in the city within the next 6 hours. Dr. Chen looked at Admiral Hale. That requires authorization from... I'll get the authorization. Hale pulled out his phone and walked away, already dialing. Dr. Chen turned back to Lena. What else? Lena pointed to the map. The subway station deployment was targeted. Morning rush hour. Maximum exposure, maximum panic, but it's not enough to create a citywide outbreak. Not with the transmission characteristics of Variant 7, which means whoever did this is planning additional deployments. We need to figure out where and when before it happens. An agent approached with a tablet. We just got confirmation. The suspect from the surveillance footage has been identified, Lena Cross. Former Army bioweapons specialist. Dishonorably discharged 3 years ago for theft of classified materials. He was working at Fort Detrick when the Variant 7 sample was stolen. Lena went very still. The agent continued reading from the tablet, oblivious. Cross has a history of anti-government extremism. We believe he's working with a domestic terrorist cell planning multiple attacks. We're tracking his known associates and... What did you say his name was? Lena's voice was quiet, too quiet. The agent looked up. Lena Cross, why? Lena turned and walked out of the command center, fast, not running, but close. Admiral Hale saw her leaving and followed. Reaper. What's wrong? She didn't answer, pushed through the door into the hallway, found an empty office, closed the door behind her. Hale came in anyway. Talk to me? Lena leaned against the desk, both hands gripping the edge. Her face was still controlled, but there was something in her eyes now, something Hale had never seen there before. Lena Cross is my brother. The silence stretched. Hale's expression shifted from confusion to comprehension to horror. Your brother, the one who... Yes. Lena's voice was flat. The one who was discharged, the one who disappeared, the one I haven't spoken to in 3 years. You didn't know he was involved in this. It wasn't a question. No, sir. I didn't know. Hale stepped closer. Does he know you're here, that you're working with us? I don't know, maybe, probably. Lena finally looked up at him. Nathan is brilliant, he's also unstable. If he's the one who released Variant 7, he didn't do it randomly. He has a plan. And if he knows I'm here, if he knows I'm involved... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Hale understood. This wasn't just a bioterrorism event anymore, it was personal. And that made it infinitely more dangerous. Lena stood in the empty office for 15 seconds, silent, still. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk, so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Admiral Hale watched her with the careful attention of someone who'd seen operators break under pressure. He'd seen strong people fold when the mission became personal. But Lena wasn't folding. She was recalibrating. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I need everything you have on Nathan. Last known location, associates, communication patterns, financial records, everything. Hale pulled out his phone and sent a text. Done, you'll have it in 5 minutes. Lena pushed off the desk. I need access to the Variant 7 research files, the original development protocols. If Nathan modified the pathogen, I need to know how. Those files are classified above your clearance level. Then unclassify them, or get someone who can. Hale studied her. You think he changed it? I know he changed it. Nathan wouldn't deploy something predictable. He'd want to prove he was smarter than everyone who worked on the project. Smarter than me? She turned to face him fully. When we worked together at Fort Detrick, he was obsessed with making pathogens more efficient, faster onset, higher transmission rates. Lower resource requirements for production. If he's had 3 years to work on Variant 7, God knows what he's turned it into. They walked back to the command center. The room had grown more chaotic in the 5 minutes they'd been gone. More analysts at stations, more phones ringing, more monitors showing incoming data. Dr. Chen met them at the entrance. We have a problem. The 12 patients transported to hospitals are deteriorating faster than expected. Symptom onset to critical condition is averaging 4 hours. That's 3 times faster than the original Variant 7 projections. Lena's jaw tightened. He accelerated the progression rate. How? Probably by targeting the cytokine response. Inducing a more aggressive immune reaction, the body attacks itself faster. Dr. Chen's face went pale. That means the mortality timeline is compressed. Instead of 72 hours, we're looking at maybe 24. And if secondary infections have already started, we have even less time. An alarm sounded on one of the monitoring stations. An analyst called out, "We have a new incident. Metro bus, Route 47, multiple passengers reporting respiratory distress." Same symptom profile. Lena moved to the station, pulled up the map. Route 47 ran through the northern part of the city. Working-class neighborhoods, high population density. Time of deployment? Unknown. First emergency call came in at 8:03. Bus is being diverted to County Memorial now. Lena looked at Hale. "That's the hospital where I was working. They're not equipped for this. They don't have isolation units. They don't have the antiviral. We're distributing it now? Not fast enough. If those patients arrive before the protocols are in place, you're going to contaminate the entire ER. Everyone I just spent 3 hours saving is going to be exposed." Hale understood immediately. "What do you need?" "A mobile containment unit. Meet the bus before it reaches the hospital. Isolate the patients on site. Treat them there until we can establish proper quarantine facilities. We don't have mobile units staged. It'll take. Then improvise, commandeer ambulances. Set up a perimeter in a parking lot. I don't care how you do it, but you cannot let those patients enter that hospital." Hale turned to one of his operators. "Make it happen." 10 minutes. The operator nodded and started coordinating. Lena pulled up the Route 47 map on a tablet, studied the timeline. Bus left downtown terminal at 7:30. Aerosol deployment likely occurred between 7:30 and 7:45. First symptoms at 8:03. That was an 18-minute incubation period. Variant 7's original incubation was 45 minutes. Nathan had cut it by more than half. She ran the calculations in her head. Faster incubation, faster progression, higher transmission rate. If this wasn't contained in the next few hours, they'd have hundreds of cases by nightfall, thousands by tomorrow. Dr. Chen appeared at her shoulder. "The experimental antiviral. You said variant 7 is resistant to ribavirin. What makes you think the experimental compound will work?" Lena didn't look up from the tablet. "Because I helped develop it. Specifically to counter enhanced hemorrhagic pathogens. It targets the replication mechanism at the RNA level, stops the virus from hijacking the host cells. You said you left the project." "I did. After we proved the compound worked. After I realized we were just creating an arms race. Build a better weapon, build a better antidote, build an even better weapon. It never ends." She finally looked at Dr. Chen. "But the compound works. I tested it myself on modified Marburg strains. 92% survival rate with early intervention. And with late intervention," Lena was quiet for a moment, 40%, maybe less with Nathan's modifications. Dr. Chen absorbed that. "So we need to identify and treat exposures within hours of contact. Within 2 hours would be ideal, 4 hours maximum. That's impossible. We don't even know where all the exposures are happening. Then we find out, fast." An analyst called across the room. "We have confirmation on Nathan Cross's location. Facial recognition hit from a traffic camera 40 minutes ago, northwest quadrant, industrial district." Lena moved to the screen. The image showed Nathan getting out of a van. He looked older than she remembered, thinner, his hair longer and unkempt, but it was him, no question. The analyst continued. "We're pulling all camera feeds from that area now. Trying to establish a pattern of movement." Lena stared at the image, at her brother. She hadn't seen him in 3 years, not since their last argument at Fort Detrick. He'd been obsessed even then. Talking about the potential for biological warfare to reshape global power structures. Talking about how governments needed to be held accountable. How the system needed to be broken before it could be fixed. She'd tried to reason with him, tried to convince him that violence wasn't the answer. He'd called her naive. Said she was too afraid to see the truth. Said she'd always been too careful, too controlled, too willing to follow orders. She'd walked away from that conversation knowing she'd lost him. But she'd never imagined it would come to this. Admiral Hale stood beside her. "We can use this. If he knows you're involved, we can leverage that, open a communication channel." "Try to negotiate." Lena shook her head. "Nathan doesn't negotiate, he proves points. He's not doing this for money or political leverage. He's doing it to demonstrate that the system is vulnerable. That the weapons we built can be turned against us. Talking to him will just give him a platform." "Then what do you suggest?" Lena turned away from the screen. We stop the attacks before he can deploy again. We find his stockpile, we find his targets, and we shut him down before more people die. And if we can't find him in time, Lena's voice went flat. Then we prepare for mass casualties. The next 2 hours were a blur of coordinated crisis response. Lena worked with Dr. Chen to establish treatment protocols for the experimental antiviral. They distributed dosing guidelines to every hospital in the city, set up emergency hotlines for symptom reporting, coordinated with the CDC to implement quarantine procedures. The mobile containment unit intercepted the Route 47 bus before it reached County Memorial. 23 passengers were isolated and treated on site. 16 responded well to the antiviral. 7 were already too far progressed. They were transferred to a military medical facility with level 4 isolation capabilities. The ER at County Memorial was spared. Doctor. Hayes called Lena directly on a secure line. "We heard what you did, stopping the bus, thank you." Lena was reviewing patient data on 3 monitors simultaneously. "How are my patients?" "Stable." "All of them, the woman you intubated is awake, asking about you. Tell her I'm glad she's okay." "When are you coming back?" Lena didn't answer that. Just ended the call. At 10:47 hours, another deployment was reported, this time at a shopping mall, food court, lunch hour crowd, estimated exposure 200 people. Lena felt something cold settle in her chest. 3 deployments in 5 hours. Nathan was accelerating. She pulled up the map, marked all 3 locations. Downtown subway station, northern bus route. Western shopping mall, there was a pattern, she just couldn't see it yet. She overlaid demographic data, population density, traffic patterns, infrastructure maps, and then she saw it. He's not targeting randomly, he's targeting transit hubs and public gathering spaces in a geographic pattern. A circle. Dr. Chen looked at the map. "A circle around what?" Lena zoomed out. Placed a digital compass at the center of the circle. County Memorial Hospital. The room went quiet. Hale stepped closer. "Why would he target locations around the hospital where you were working?" "Because he knows I'll respond. He knows I'll try to save everyone. He's spreading me thin. Making me choose." "Choose what?" Lena looked at him. "Who lives and who dies, it's what he always accused me of doing, playing God, deciding who gets treatment and who doesn't. He's forcing me to do it on a massive scale." An alert sounded. Another analyst called out. "We have a communication, email sent to multiple news outlets and federal agencies. Source traced to an encrypted server. Message reads, 'The cure is worse than the disease. Ask Dr. Lena Cross why she helped build what she now claims to want to stop. Ask her how many people she's willing to sacrifice to maintain the system.'" The message was signed with a biohazard symbol. Lena closed her eyes. Nathan wasn't just deploying a bioweapon. He was weaponizing her past, making her complicit in the attack, turning her into the villain of his narrative. Hale's voice was controlled but hard. "He's trying to break you, publicly. Make you question your choices, make you hesitate. I know what he's doing. Will it work?" Lena opened her eyes. "No, because he's wrong. The work I did at Fort Detrick wasn't about building weapons. It was about understanding threats so we could defend against them. He twisted that purpose into something it was never meant to be. And now I'm going to stop him from killing anyone else with it." She turned to the analysts. "I need a predictive model. Based on the 3 deployment locations and times, calculate the most likely next target. Factor in population density, accessibility, symbolic value, and maximum exposure potential." The analysts worked for 8 minutes. Then one of them looked up. "Based on the pattern, the next deployment will most likely occur at Union Station. Main terminal. Afternoon commuter rush. ETA for maximum exposure, 1700 hours. That's 5 hours and 13 minutes from now." Lena looked at Hale. "We need to evacuate Union Station. That's 40,000 people during rush hour. The panic alone will cause casualties. More people will die if we don't evacuate." Hale was quiet for a long moment, making the calculation every commander had to make. Certain harm versus potential catastrophe. Finally, he nodded. "I'll coordinate with local police and transit authority. But if we're wrong, if he deploys somewhere else while we're focused on Union Station, then we'll respond. That's all we can do, react faster than he can act." Dr. Chen pulled Lena aside. "There's something else." The antiviral supply, we have enough for maybe 500 doses. If he continues deploying at this rate, we'll run out by tomorrow morning. Can you manufacture more? Not fast enough. The compound takes 72 hours to synthesize. We'd need the original research data and a BSL-4 lab to even attempt it. Lena was quiet, thinking, calculating. Then, Nathan has the data. He took it when he stole the variant 7 sample. If we can find his lab, we can find the research files. Use them to accelerate production. That's assuming his lab is equipped for synthesis. Nathan wouldn't deploy a weapon without ensuring he had ongoing supply. He's meticulous, obsessive. He'll have a lab, we just need to find it, an analyst called out. We have a hit on the van from the traffic camera, tracked it to a warehouse in the industrial district. Building registered to a shell company, no activity on record for the past 18 months. Lena turned to Hale. That's his lab. We don't know that for certain. Yes, we do. Nathan would choose somewhere isolated, somewhere with power and water but no oversight. An abandoned industrial building is perfect. Hale pulled up the building schematics on the main screen. If we go in, we go heavy, full tactical team, assume hostile presence, assume booby traps. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not, you're a civilian consultant. You're not cleared for, he's my brother, I know how he thinks, I know what to look for, you need me there. Hale looked at her for a long moment. Then, you stay behind the entry team. You don't engage, you observe and advise only. Clear. Clear. Hale turned to his operators. Gear up. We move in 20 minutes. Lena was given tactical body armor and a radio headset. She didn't ask for a weapon, didn't want one. She'd carried weapons before, used them when necessary. But this wasn't that kind of mission. This was about stopping her brother before he killed more people. And she knew, had known from the moment she saw his name, that stopping him might mean making a choice she'd been dreading for 3 years. The convoy rolled out at 11:34 hours. 3 SUVs carrying a 12-man SEAL team, Admiral Hale, Dr. Chen, and Lena. They drove in silence through the city. Lena stared out the window, watching the normal world go by, people walking dogs. Kids playing in parks, life continuing, unaware of the crisis unfolding around them. She thought about the patients at County Memorial, about the 15 people she'd saved during the mass casualty. About how saving lives was supposed to be simple. You identified the problem, you applied the solution, you moved to the next patient. But nothing was simple anymore. The warehouse was exactly what she'd expected. Isolated, dilapidated, surrounded by a chain-link fence with faded no trespassing signs. The team staged 2 blocks away. Hale reviewed the tactical plan with his operators. 2-man entry teams, clear each room systematically, watch for IEDs or chemical hazards. If you encounter the suspect, non-lethal apprehension is preferred, but if he's armed or poses an immediate threat, you are weapons-free. The operators nodded, professionals. They'd done this hundreds of times. Lena watched them prepare, watched them check equipment and coordinate signals. This was her world once, or adjacent to it. She'd never been an operator. Never kicked down doors, but she'd been there in the aftermath, treating the wounded, stabilizing the dying. She understood the violence these men were preparing to deliver. One of the team leaders approached her. Ma'am, when we enter, you stay in the vehicle until we signal all clear. Understood? Lena nodded. Understood. But she knew she wouldn't. Because if Nathan was inside that warehouse, she needed to see him, needed to talk to him. Needed to try one more time to reach whatever part of her brother still existed beneath the extremism and obsession. The team moved out, silent, coordinated, professional. They cut through the fence and approached the warehouse from 3 angles. Lena watched on a monitor in the SUV, fed by helmet cameras. The operators reached the entry points, stacked up. Prepared to breach. And then everything went wrong. The explosion wasn't large, just enough to blow the door off its hinges and throw the lead operator backward. He hit the ground hard. The team immediately shifted to cover positions, returned fire protocols, but there was no gunfire, just smoke and silence. Lena's radio crackled. IED at entry point, 1 man down. Possible chemical hazard, we're pulling back. Hale's voice cut through. Negative, maintain position. We need to confirm if the building is occupied. Lena was already out of the SUV. Moving toward the warehouse, Admiral Hale saw her and shouted, Reaper, stand down! She didn't stop, didn't slow. She reached the fallen operator. He was conscious but dazed, possible concussion. She checked his vitals quickly, stable. 2 other operators were already pulling him to safety. Lena looked at the blown doorway. Smoke was clearing. Inside was dark. She pulled a flashlight from one of the operator's vests and stepped through the opening. "Lena, get out of there!" Hale's voice in her earpiece. She didn't respond. Just moved deeper into the warehouse. Her light swept across empty space. Concrete floors, rusted equipment, and then she saw it. In the back corner, a makeshift laboratory, fume hoods, centrifuges. Refrigeration units. Exactly what Nathan would need to synthesize Variant 7. She approached carefully, checking for tripwires, secondary explosives, but there was nothing. The lab was empty. Abandoned, she reached the workbench and found what she was looking for. Research notes. Scattered papers covered in chemical formulas and handwritten annotations. Nathan's handwriting. She recognized it immediately. And there, at the bottom of one page, a message written directly to her. "You always said we should use our knowledge to protect people. I'm showing you what happens when protection becomes control. The system you defend is the disease, Lena. I'm just the symptom. Union Station, 1700 hours. Stop me if you can." Lena's hands tightened on the paper. He knew she'd find this, knew she'd come here. He'd left the message as a taunt, a challenge, confirmation that Union Station was the target. The SEAL team entered behind her, swept the lab, confirmed it was clear. Hale appeared at her shoulder. "What did you find?" Lena handed him the note. He read it, his jaw tightening. "He's baiting you. I know. Union Station, 1700 hours. That gives us 5 hours." "I know." Hale looked at her. "What do you want to do?" Lena stared at her brother's handwriting. At the challenge written in his familiar scrawl, and she made the only choice she could make. "We stop him. Union Station at 1630 hours was a study in controlled chaos." Police had begun evacuating the main terminal under the guise of a security threat. Commuters were being redirected to buses and alternate transit points. The official story was a suspicious package. The real story was being managed by federal agents in tactical command vehicles, staged 3 blocks away. Lena sat in one of those vehicles, staring at a bank of monitors showing every entrance, every platform, every corridor of the massive station. Beside her, Admiral Hale coordinated with SEAL teams positioned at strategic points throughout the building. Dr. Chen monitored biohazard sensors that had been deployed covertly in ventilation shafts and high-traffic areas. They were ready as they could be, but Lena knew her brother. Knew that Nathan would have anticipated this response. He was too smart to walk into a trap, too careful to make himself an easy target. Which meant he was either already inside or he'd changed his plan. The clock on the monitor read 16:42, 18 minutes until his stated deployment time. "We have a problem, Doctor." Chen was looking at her tablet, her face pale. "I just received a message sent to my official USAMRIID email from Lena Cross." Lena turned. "What does it say?" Dr. Chen hesitated, then read aloud. "Dr. Chen, you don't know me, but you know my sister. She's told you I'm a terrorist, a threat, someone who needs to be stopped, but I'm not your enemy. The system that created Variant 7 is. The system that builds weapons and calls it defense. Tell Lena I'm not at Union Station. I was never going to be. She knows where I am. She's always known." The message ended there. Hale leaned forward. "What does that mean? She's always known?" Lena stood up so fast her chair rolled backward. Her face had gone completely still, the kind of stillness that came before action. "County Memorial Hospital." Hale's expression shifted to confusion. "The hospital where you were working, why would?" "Because that's where it started, 3 years ago, before Fort Detrick." Before any of this, Lena was already moving toward the exit. "Nathan and I both worked at County Memorial as medical residents. It's where we first started talking about biological research. About pathogens and treatments and the ethics of dual-use science. He's going back to the beginning." Dr. Chen pulled up a map on her tablet. "But County Memorial has already been cleared. We diverted the contaminated bus, implemented containment protocols. There's no reason to. He's not deploying outside the hospital. He's deploying inside it." Lena's voice was hard, certain. "He's targeting the ER, the place where I spent 3 hours saving lives. He's going to show me that all that work was meaningless." That the system I'm trying to protect can't be protected. Hale was already on the radio, redirecting units. All teams, new target location, County Memorial Hospital. Suspect believed to be inside the building, approach with extreme caution, biological hazard likely. He turned to Lena. How do you know he's there? Because it's what I would do. If I wanted to prove that the system was broken, I'd target the people trying to save it. The doctors, the nurses, the patients who survived the mass casualty. I'd show that even in a place dedicated to healing, the weapon still wins. She was in the vehicle, slamming the door. We need to move now. The convoy rolled out with sirens and lights. No more covert approach. No more pretending this was anything other than what it was. A race against a man with a bioweapon and nothing left to lose. Lena's hands were clenched in her lap. Her mind was running through possibilities. Nathan would have entered the hospital hours ago, possibly during the mass casualty event when security was overwhelmed. He could have posed as a patient. A family member, a delivery person, dozens of ways to slip inside unnoticed, and once inside he'd wait for the right moment. For maximum impact, the convoy arrived at County Memorial at 16:59 hours. 1 minute before Nathan's stated deployment time, the hospital looked normal from the outside. Ambulances in the bay. People moving through the main entrance. No visible signs of crisis. Hale's team moved in fast, full tactical gear, weapons ready. They entered through multiple access points, coordinating over encrypted radio. Lena followed the primary team through the main entrance. Staff in the lobby turned to stare. Patients looked up in alarm. A security guard approached, hand on his radio. What's happening? We weren't notified of. Evacuate this building. Now, biological threat. Get everyone out. The guard's face went white. He started speaking rapidly into his radio. Alarms began sounding, not fire alarms, the hospital's disaster protocol, code black, internal threat. The same protocol that had been activated earlier when the airborne pathogen sensors had detected the first deployment. Lena pushed past the growing confusion and headed for the ER. That's where Nathan would be, she was certain. The ER was in the middle of a shift change, day staff preparing to leave, night staff arriving. Dr. Hayes was at the nurses' station reviewing charts. He looked up when Lena burst through the doors, followed by armed SEAL operators. What's going on? Lena scanned the room. 15 beds, most occupied. Patients from the earlier mass casualty event still being monitored, staff moving between them. Everything looked normal, too normal. Where's your ventilation control panel? Hayes blinked. What? Why, where is it? Mechanical room, basement level, but you can't just... Lena was already running, down the corridor, through the stairwell access, Hale and 2 operators right behind her. They reached the basement in 40 seconds. The mechanical room door was propped open. That was wrong. That door was always locked, always secured. Lena pulled it open and stepped inside. The room was a maze of pipes and ductwork and humming machinery. And standing in the center of it, next to the main air handler, was Nathan. He looked worse than the traffic camera footage had suggested. Thinner, haunted. His clothes hung loose on his frame. His eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion or something worse. But he was alert, focused, and in his hand was a small aerosol canister, the same type he'd used in the subway station, in the bus. In the shopping mall, Lena stopped 5 feet away. Behind her, she heard the operators raising their weapons. Nathan's voice was calm, almost conversational. Tell them to lower their guns, Lena. Or I release this right now. It's connected to the ventilation system. It'll spread through the entire hospital in 4 minutes. Lena raised her hand without turning around, a signal to stand down. She heard the operator's shifting position, maintaining aim but not advancing. Nathan, her voice was steady, it's over. Is it? He smiled. It was a terrible smile, empty. I don't think so. I think it's just beginning. You've killed 17 people, infected hundreds more. What did it prove? That the system you trust is fragile, that the weapons we built can't be contained. That you can't save everyone no matter how hard you try. Lena took 1 step closer. Is that what this is about? Proving that I can't save everyone? You always acted like you could. Like your competence and your protocols and your precious restraint made you better than the chaos. But you're not better than it. You're just delaying it. So you decided to accelerate it. To force the chaos. I decided to show the truth, That the system that created Variant 7 is the same system that can't protect against it. That the difference between cure and weapon is just intention, and intention changes. Nathan's hand tightened on the canister. You helped build this, Lena. You wrote the protocols. You tested the compounds, and now you're trying to pretend you're innocent, that you're just saving lives, but you enabled the deaths first. Lena didn't flinch, didn't look away. You're right. I did help build it. I helped create the knowledge that you're now weaponizing. But the difference between us isn't that I'm innocent and you're guilty. It's that I learned to accept responsibility for what I created. I left. I walked away. And I've spent 3 years trying to save the lives that my work endangered. What have you done except make it worse? Nathan's expression flickered. Something in Lena's words had landed, but then his face hardened again. Saving lives in the system doesn't change the system. It just maintains it, keeps it running. You're still complicit. Maybe, but I'd rather be complicit in saving people than complicit in killing them. Lena took another step. She was 3 feet away now, close enough to see the exhaustion in her brother's eyes, close enough to see that he was barely holding together. Nathan, you're sick. You've been exposed to Variant 7. I can see the symptoms, the hemorrhaging in your eyes, the tremor in your hands. You don't have much time. I know. His voice was quieter now. I infected myself 2 days ago. Tested the progression rate. I have maybe 6 hours left. Then let me treat you. Let me give you the antiviral. You don't have to die. Yes, I do. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her. And for a moment she saw her brother again, not the extremist, not the terrorist, just Nathan, the person he'd been before obsession consumed him. I did this knowing it would kill me. Knowing I'd become part of the body count. It's the only way to prove I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not asking anyone to sacrifice something I'm not willing to sacrifice myself. Lena felt something break inside her chest. You're not proving anything except that you're lost. That you let your anger turn into something you can't control. Maybe, but at least I did something. At least I forced people to see the truth. The truth is that you're my brother. And I don't want you to die. Nathan's hand wavered. The canister dropped an inch. You should have thought about that before you abandoned me at Fort Detrick. Before you walked away and left me alone with all that knowledge and no one to talk me out of using it. I didn't abandon you. I tried to help you. You pushed me away. Because you wouldn't listen. Wouldn't see what I was seeing. You were too invested in believing the system could be fixed. Nathan's voice cracked. I needed you to see it was broken, Lena. I needed you to be angry enough to do something, but you just left. Lena took the final step. She was right in front of him now, close enough to touch. I left because I couldn't watch you destroy yourself. Because I loved you too much to stay and enable what you were becoming. Nathan stared at her. Tears were running down his face. Mixing with the blood seeping from his eyes, symptoms of the virus eating him alive from the inside. I'm going to die either way. The virus, the arrest, it doesn't matter. I'm already gone. It matters to me. Lena reached out slowly, placed her hand over his, the hand holding the canister. Let me have it, Nathan. Let me stop this. Please. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't respond. The mechanical room hummed around them. The ventilation system that could spread his weapon through the entire hospital if he activated it. The system that could kill hundreds more people, including the patients Lena had saved just hours earlier. Finally, Nathan's grip loosened. Lena gently took the canister from his hand. Passed it back to one of the operators without looking. The operator secured it in a containment case. Nathan collapsed, not dramatically, just let go. His legs gave out and he sank to the floor. Lena caught him, lowered him gently. He was crying, shaking. The virus was ravaging his system. He had hours left, maybe less. I'm sorry. Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry, Lena. She held him, this broken, dying man who was still her brother. I know. Admiral Hale stepped forward. We need to get him into isolation. Transport him to the military medical facility. Lena nodded, didn't let go. The operators moved in with a containment stretcher. They lifted Nathan carefully, strapped him down. Prepared him for transport. He looked at Lena one more time before they took him away. You were right. The anger, it consumed everything else. I can't even remember what I was trying to prove anymore. Lena watched them carry him out, watched her brother disappear down the corridor. She stood there in the mechanical room, surrounded by the humming machinery, and felt the weight of every choice she'd made in the past 3 years. Every patient saved, every life prioritized. Every moment she'd chosen to work within the system instead of burning it down. Nathan had accused her of being complicit. Maybe he was right. But she'd rather be complicit in saving lives than destroying them. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Is it over?" Lena turned. Her face was expressionless. "Yes, the canister. Secured. No deployment, no additional casualties." Dr. Chen exhaled, relief, exhaustion. "You saved them, everyone in this hospital, everyone who would have been infected." Lena didn't respond to that. Just walked past her, back up the stairs, back to the ER. Dr. Hayes was waiting, along with most of the staff. They looked at her with something between awe and fear. "Is it true?" Hayes asked. "Was your brother?" "Yes." Lena cut him off. She looked around the ER, at the patients still being monitored, at the staff who'd worked alongside her. At the space where she'd spent 3 hours performing surgery and stabilizations during the mass casualty event. Everything looked the same, but everything was different. The patients from the earlier deployments, the ones who received the antiviral, what's their status? Hayes checked his tablet. 83% survival rate, better than we expected. The ones who received treatment within the first 4 hours are all stable. The ones who waited longer, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Lena understood the math. 17 dead. Hundreds exposed. The system had held. Barely. Because of the antiviral she'd helped develop. Because of the protocols she'd helped establish. Because of the knowledge she and Nathan had built together and then used in opposite directions. "I need to check on my patients." She moved through the ER, reviewing charts. The woman she'd intubated during the mass casualty was awake, breathing on her own, recovering. The man with the tension pneumothorax was stable. The teenager with the pelvic fracture was in surgery but expected to survive. 15 patients, all alive. The work she'd done that night had mattered, had saved lives that would have been lost. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like triage, like choosing who lived while accepting that others would die. Exactly what Nathan had accused her of. At 2100 hours, Admiral Hale found her in the staff lounge. She was sitting alone, drinking bad coffee, staring at nothing. "We need to debrief. Go over everything that happened. Document the timeline." Lena nodded. "Tomorrow. I need to finish my shift first." "Your shift ended 6 hours ago. Then I need to start a new one?" Hale sat down across from her. "Nathan's being transported to Walter Reed. They're giving him the experimental antiviral, but his prognosis..." He didn't finish. Lena finished her coffee. "I know, I saw the progression rate. He has maybe 12 hours. The antiviral might extend that to 24, but his organs are already failing. He waited too long." "I'm sorry." Lena looked at him. "Are you?" "He killed 17 people. Endangered hundreds more. He weaponized research that was meant to save lives. Why would you be sorry?" "Because he was your brother. Because despite everything he did, you still tried to save him." Lena was quiet for a long moment. "I tried to save him 3 years ago, before any of this started. I failed then too." Hale leaned back. "The Navy wants you back. Full reinstatement, whatever rank and position you want. After what you did today, stopping the attack, coordinating the medical response. Neutralizing your own brother, you've earned it." "I don't want it." "Why not?" "Because being part of the system means making the same choices that led to this. Building weapons, creating knowledge that can be weaponized, participating in an arms race that never ends. I left for a reason, Admiral. That reason hasn't changed." "Then what will you do?" Lena stood, set down her coffee cup. "What I've been doing, working in hospitals, saving lives one patient at a time, staying invisible. It's not much, but it's honest work, and it's mine." She walked toward the door. Hale called after her. "Reaper, thank you for everything." She stopped, didn't turn around. "Don't call me that. That's not who I am anymore." "Then who are you?" Lena was quiet. "Then, just a nurse." She left. By 600 hours the next morning, the crisis had been officially contained. All exposed individuals had been identified and treated. The experimental antiviral had been distributed to hospitals across the city. Nathan's lab had been secured and his research notes confiscated. The media was reporting a suspected bioterrorism event that had been successfully neutralized by federal authorities. No mention of Lena, no mention of Reaper. No mention of the combat medic who'd saved 15 people during a mass casualty event and then stopped her own brother from killing hundreds more. exactly how she wanted it. Hospital administration tried to find her, tried to thank her, offer her a permanent position. But when they pulled her file, it was empty, no credentials on record, no employment history. No contact information, just a note in the system, clocked out at 600. Status, inactive. Dr. Hayes asked everyone who would listen, but no one knew where she'd gone. Jessica, the nurse who'd helped her during the mass casualty, said she'd seen Lena leave through the staff exit just after dawn. Walking alone. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. 3 weeks later, a woman clocked in for a night shift at Providence General Hospital in a different city. She gave her name as Sarah Mitchell, float nurse, temporary assignment. She was quiet. Kept to herself, moved through the ER with efficient, almost invisible competence. No one paid much attention to her. She was just another nurse, forgettable, unremarkable, perfect. And when the night shift ended, she clocked out at 600 hours and walked into the morning light. Ready to save lives no one would ever know she'd saved. Ready to carry the weight of every choice she'd made, every person she'd saved, every person she'd failed to save. It was heavy, but it was hers. And it was enough. Nathan Cross died 36 hours after his arrest, alone in an isolation unit at Walter Reed. The experimental antiviral had extended his life just long enough for him to write a letter. It was delivered to Lena 2 weeks later, forwarded through channels she'd left in place for emergencies. She opened it alone, read it once, then burned it without telling anyone what it said. Some words were meant to stay private, some confessions didn't need witnesses. She scattered the ashes in a river and watched them disappear downstream. And then she went back to work, because that's what she did, that's who she was, not Reaper. Not Lieutenant Colonel Lena Cross, just a nurse, working night shifts in hospitals across the country, saving lives quietly, invisibly, one patient at a time. The system Nathan had tried to destroy kept running, imperfect, broken in places, but still standing, still functioning, still saving more lives than it cost, and Lena was part of that. Not because she believed the system was perfect, but because imperfect systems still saved lives, and saving lives still mattered, even when the cost was high, even when the choices were impossible, even when the weight never got lighter. It still mattered, and that was enough.